Hello, brothers, sisters, and friends, and welcome to the Fight Like Hell podcast. This is the official podcast of the National Association of Letter Carriers, the union that represents over 290,000 active and retired letter carriers and employees of the United States Postal Service. I'm Ed Morgan, and as always, we're joined by our national president, Brian Renfro. Hey, Brian, how are you?
Hey Eddie, great to be with you.
Yeah, likewise. It's a little bit different today. We're shooting a video here. I hope
Yeah.
no children see me and get afraid.
Yeah, they get to see our lovely faces.
Yeah, yeah. Take it easy on me, comments, trolls out there. So, just a
They
little
will.
preamble before we get started. You had a virtual Labor Day parade event. Uh, Before that, you were actually at the Philadelphia parade, and we got to march together in that parade, which was a really good thing. I really enjoyed it, going home and seeing my branch and all my friends and family. But you had your virtual event, and after that event, you asked if anybody had any questions. So we're going to have an Ask the Mailbag segment at the end, but I just want to let everyone know, our listeners and followers and watchers now, that we are actually going to integrate some of those questions into the show. And I will let everyone know who asked that question while we were going along.
Yeah, it was Eddie. It was great to be there with you and Branch 157 on Labor Day. So we actually had a physical parade, and then we had the virtual event that you mentioned Monday night. We got so many good questions that initially our plans were just to record another video and just ask and answer the questions, but we decided there were so many good ones on a variety of topics that it would be better to frame the whole thing into a podcast. So we're excited to do it in this format and get answers to a lot of the great questions that we received from our members that tuned in on Labor Day. And before we move into that, that's something we plan to do fairly frequently, just as there's updates to give. So we'll make that available. Certainly get the word out before we decide to launch another one, depending on what's going on. We got a lot in front of us, as we'll talk about today, in terms of collective bargaining prep and what's going on in Congress and what's going on with the White House and so on and so forth.
Great. All right, well, let's start off. We got a bunch of topics we're going to hit today. Let's start off with the new Postmaster General. So, since our last podcast, we have a new Postmaster General. His name's David Steiner. Have you spoken to him yet?
Yeah, several times. He's been in the job, I guess, is the day we're recording this, exactly 2 months. So, that's not very long in terms of the type of responsibilities that come with being Postmaster General. But yeah, we've had definitely had some communication.
So, how does that relationship work between the Postmaster General and the National Association Letter Carriers President on a normal basis?
Yeah, it's a little bit different with each PMG, and that's not necessarily a reflection of that individual. It's usually more of a reflection of the way they structure the management over at the Postal Service. So, the previous PMG, Louis DeJoy, we had a lot of communication with. He by nature was a very hands-on type. His two predecessors that I had direct experience with were one was 180 degrees from that, and the other was somewhere in the middle. But the communication is typically about, really big picture things related to the Postal Service, related to letter carriers. And then there's almost a constant communication in this era now that we've been in for 15 plus years of trying to achieve postal reform. There's almost a constant communication that takes place in terms of the oversight from members of Congress on the Hill and, trying to get legislation done that is beneficial to the Postal Service and, of course, beneficial to letter carriers too.
Do you have any indication about his vision for the Postal Service and how that's going to affect letter carriers?
Yeah, in the conversations I've had with him, it's been very general. A job that has this much responsibility, he's only been on the job 2 months, and thankfully there's not been major changes yet. He's made some what I would characterize as minor changes to the structure of management over at the Postal Service headquarters. So he's still sort of trying to figure things out, in this big complex operation. But generally speaking, the vision, that he shared is to continue modernization to meet today's needs of the postal customers. And, in communication with him, both what you've heard from him publicly and then even in private communication, he said all the right things, which, would be a terrible mistake not to say the right things in communication with me. But we've been really just blunt and honest about where the Postal Service needs to go, um, the growth strategy that we need, the importance of the employees, and then maybe most importantly, given the climate that we're in, that I know we're going to talk about a little more as this podcast goes on, if he decides to go the wrong direction, um, there will be a serious, serious price to pay, and our union would be the ones leading that charge. So, I think his vision in terms of what we know right now is to continue, modernization. He's mentioned to me several times that services is the most important thing, and so but it's a little too early to judge because there's not been any real tangible changes in terms of their kind of big picture plan. So that's the vision that he's articulated. I'm sure as he's in the job a little longer and starts to make some changes and make some moves, and we'll see more tangible evidence of the direction that he intends to go.
How does the Postmaster General, uh, what kind of effect does he have on collective bargaining, which is, what we're going to be talking about later in the podcast?
Yeah, of course, he's, ultimately the one that for the Postal Service, just like, me as the president of NALC is going to eventually make the call as to, for example, whether we have a tentative agreement or we don't. Um, that said, historically, post PMGs have not been, very involved in kind of the day-to-day negotiations. There have been instances in past rounds of bargaining where, maybe they got involved at the very end to try to finish a deal or something like that. I don't know this for a fact, but I think the combination of um, my initial impressions of Postmaster General Steiner and the fact that the Deputy Postmaster General, at the current time anyway, is a labor relations person and is someone that we bargained with for a long, long time. I would be very, very surprised if he has any significant role in the bargaining process, probably in line with what we've seen traditionally from PMGs.
Okay. Let's get into the White House. We're seeing an executive order stripping other federal employees, unions of their collective bargaining rights. Can you explain to the listeners what's happening with those unions and how we're alike and then how we're different with our collective bargaining?
Yeah, first, it's been horrific to be very candid about it. What we have seen from this administration, mostly through executive order, some just through agency actions that they've decided to take, has been a flat out, unadulterated, union busting attack on organized labor and an attack on federal workers. Hundreds of thousands of our brothers and sisters that are represented by AFGE primarily, but also some of the other unions that represent federal employees have lost collective bargaining rights. They've had their collective bargaining agreements torn up. They've lost things that we take for granted, such as what they call official time, what we call steward time, the employer paying for steward work, the ability to collect dues through payroll deduction. So it has been really an attack on unions, an attack on federal employees. It's unprecedented in American history. We often read in labor history about events that have happened over time, and one that's kind of famous or maybe infamous, depending on which perspective you have on it, was with the air traffic controllers in the 1980s, and when President Reagan, fired all the air traffic controllers. And while that was a horrible thing and an attack on labor, the sheer number of people that affected compared to what the actions we've seen this year from the Trump administration, the number of people it's affected, um, they don't even compare. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people here. In a lot of ways, we are similar to other federal employees. those, in terms of the benefits that we have in large part mirror them. Um, our retirement systems, of course, are the same retirement systems, whether that's the civil service retirement system or the federal employees retirement system first. However, there are significant key differences. The Postal Service is an independent federal agency as it was established in the Postal Reorganization Act that followed the strike in 1970, um, granted us full collective bargaining rights. And, that law also requires the Postal Service to, if it's bargained, to deduct dues for unions. So the place that those rights come from for us compared to other federal employees are different. And, we have, of course, done significant preparation to anticipate any reasonable possibility of attacks. And the centerpiece of anything we would have to defend legally would be the Postal Reorganization Act. And, while legally it appears to be a rock solid case, we have seen literally every day throughout this administration that actions have been taken that face legal challenges, and some were successful and some were not successful. So, they have definitely not given any indication or confidence that just because something would appear to be illegal, that they won't attempt to do it. So, in some ways, we have a stronger case than what our brothers and sisters are having to defend that are other federal employees. Um, but I say this all the time, you don't ignore what you see, and you don't ignore what's actually happened. And the fact is that this administration's attacks on organized labor started with the easiest place because the um, White House has a lot of control over the different departments of the federal government, a little less control over the Postal Service, but that would be a logical next place to go. And we've seen indications of that, such as in the proposed budget that the White House put out a few months ago that Congress is going to take up here in the next couple of weeks. So, it's been horrible what we've seen happen to other unions. We have, of course, stood side by side with them. We have stood in solidarity with them. AFG in particular has, also stood in solidarity with us back on March 23rd when we had nearly 300 rallies all around the country. I went to a rally in Los Angeles that Branch 24 put together, and AFG's president Everett Kelly, my brother, a good friend of mine, went with me to that rally and spoke in support of our issues, and we continue to support them in their fights.
What's our game plan to try to prevent this from happening to us? Like, do we have something ready to go?
Oh yeah, we've been working on a lot of things really since the beginning of this administration. This podcast is called the Fight Like Hell podcast, and when we announced this Fight Like Hell campaign back in February, while it covers a lot of different topics, this is one that we just simply knew there would be fights because of the direction that we suspected this administration would go. You never know exactly when that's going to happen. As it turns out, there was a threat that happened really quickly at the end of February. The administration strongly considered, in fact, it was actually imminent at one point, that they were going to take some executive action to drastically alter the Postal Service. And the way we fought back then is on several fronts. Number one, our members contacting at different points in time the White House, contacting certain members of Congress, contacting the Speaker of the House. And then we also, politically embraced and utilized the broad bipartisan support that the Postal Service has as a public entity and a public service for the American people. So there's a lot of political pressure that happens behind the scenes. The support that we have on both sides of the aisle in Congress that can be communicated through congressional leadership to the White House that, hey, screwing with the Postal Service like you're doing with the rest of the federal government is a really, really bad idea. And that's going to have significant consequences. We also, of course, have, lobbied directly on the Hill, and we'll continue to do that. And we've activated a lot of folks in the public. I mean, getting the word out about this stuff because people care about the Postal Service. Our customers support us, they support the Postal Service. So letting them know what's happening is very important. They will support us, they just have to know. And we do that in a number of ways. We do that through some digital targeted campaigns that aren't often always that visible. We do that through very public events like the large rally we held here in DC in late February and the 300 rallies we held around the country in March. We do those to not just make ourselves feel good and, get together and rah rah and yell and scream. We really do them to generate media coverage, which raises awareness on the issue with the general public. So we have continued to just constantly on a daily basis sort of take the temperature of where the administration is on the Postal Service. There have been things that will bubble up from time to time, but we are fully prepared to ramp up everything we need to ramp up very quickly should they decide to take some sort of action that would be detrimental to letter carriers.
Let's go to the mailbag a little early here. We got Branch 6000 President, Long Island, Rich Miklahos. He wanted to know how the NALC is going to deal with stopping the automatic dues deduction if that happens. How would the union continue to operate from the national level, the branches, down to the steward level on the workroom floor?
Yeah, Richard, really good question. So when it comes to, it really any circumstance, but I think particularly what we've dealt with in 2025, and what we just talked about with other federal employees, we as a union have to be prepared for any outcome that is a reasonable possibility. This administration has been unlike any other administration, including the first Trump administration. So in some ways they are unpredictable, intentionally unpredictable, which means that range of outcomes is wide. So the prep that we have to do and the due diligence is consider, could we face some legal fight to maintain collective bargaining rights, to protect specifically in the question here about the Postal Service's ability to deduct dues. Steward time is another. So we have done, of course, tons of legal preparation and basically sit ready to initiate legal action tomorrow should that unfortunately come. We also, as a union, operationally have to prepare for the impacts of some sort of action, whether that's short-term or long-term. Specifically to the question of dues deduction, we have done a pretty significant amount of preparation on different scenarios. So let's just say, for example, and Richie, I think what your question is about here is tomorrow, all of a sudden the Post Service can't withhold dues anymore. That means that essentially the revenue for the union stops because it doesn't come out through payroll deduction. So there's two main components of adjusting or making changes or reacting, however you want to put it, to a change like that. Number one is, of course, having an alternate way to collect dues, giving members a way to pay their dues. That is very easy in today's world technologically. That is something that the ability to turn something like that on is easy. The challenge, of course, is communicating that to hundreds of thousands of people that here's how you have to do it now. The second piece is that, and we've learned this directly from our brothers and sisters in AFGE and the other federal unions that have had to do this over the last several months. Of course, there's no way you can, in any reasonable amount of time, turn 295,000, almost 295,000 dues paying members automatically from payroll deduction into some other system. So the union very quickly will experience a almost complete loss in revenue. So the second piece of it, other than giving an alternate way to pay dues, is we have to prepare to really figure out operationally, how do we want to prioritize things? How do we want to move forward? Let me just give you a few examples of the type things we would have to consider. We as a national union are very sound financially. We, thanks to a lot of work for decades from, a lot of people, We are in an excellent spot financially. We could sustain operations for a pretty significant period of time, but it's really not about the national union. It's the fact that the vast majority of that money that we get from the Postal Service is distributed to our branches to fund what branches do. So the question then becomes, if there's no revenue, how do we fund the branches? Um, of course, if you end up in a circumstance like that, you certainly want to prioritize the things that we have to do. So we have worked through different types of which are of course representation, primarily, and then just the sort of bare bones kind of legally required functions of the branch. So, there's the distribution of money, how that would work. But even beyond that, there's also a lot of things that would probably have to take place in a scenario like this. For example, branch bylaws have all sorts of types of expenditures that are included. For example, if a branch has a yearly event, a picnic or something like that, when we got to an event like that, given this type of circumstance, that might not be the best way for us to spend the dues money. So there's dispensations that would have to be done broadly. I will tell you, we 100% have a plan. We, of course, hope that we never have to activate that plan, but we have a plan that should this happen, and it's very short term. Of course, legally, we would seek, an immediate type of injunctive relief to stop it, or if it's something that, had to go through the normal legal process and stretched out over months. We have plans in place. Without getting too specific, I'll say that when it comes to the way we would fund the branches, we would, of course, prioritize representation, and we would have a fairly seamless way to, ensure that the funding that we were providing to the branches, was used for representation.
Okay. Getting into the president and his remarks in the last couple of weeks, and now other representatives getting involved about the ending of vote by mail.
Yeah.
Doug Janes, the branch 47 from branch 47 in Denver, Colorado, the Colorado State President Emeritus, had a question. He said, "Can you talk about the history of vote by mail and what we have accomplished, and why vote by mail is popular and well used the way it is?"
Yeah, I mean it's become more and more popular. More states than ever utilize fully vote by mail elections now. We, as a union, have advocated for it for a long time. It's obviously in our own interest because it's revenue for the Postal Service. But even beyond that, I mean, with all of the these days just craziness that surrounds elections and wild accusations that are in conspiracy theories, and it's also the most secure way, and it really is what's best for our democracy. We firmly believe that. We helped found a nonprofit organization called the National Vote at Home Institute that supports election officials, that advocates for vote by mail. Back in late 2017, and during COVID, we saw a significant increase in vote by mail. But the facts are, it's more secure. It does not benefit one party or the other. It increases turnout. So if it's in a location that is heavily Democratic, then it I guess it benefits Democrats. If it's in a location that's heavily Republican, it benefits Republicans. And fundamentally, I think giving more folks the right and ability to vote is a good thing. The president has made a lot of comments about it. He's even threatened to take certain executive actions, which is a little interesting that states are the ones that decide how they conduct their elections, and typically Republicans have been pretty staunchly in favor of state rights. So it remains to be seen, whether there's going to be any like tangible action attempted on vote by mail from the federal level. or if it's just talk. Just the other day, Senator Mike Lee from Utah tweeted something absolutely ridiculous about, accusing postal employees of because we endorse candidates in elections and we shouldn't be able to handle ballots. And, I kind of sharply responded to him. But, media has asked me a lot of questions about this the last few days. And I tell them what every letter carrier listening to this knows, that when we pick up or deliver a ballot, we do not care what's in that envelope. We don't even have time to think about
Yeah.
what's in that envelope. It's like one of thousands and thousands of things that happen over the course of every single day. But I think it's just a polarizing political topic. The president has talked about it for years and years and years, and it just seems to pop up, every now and then. But I will commit that what we are going to do is, of course, we'll advocate for it because we think it's good for us. We think it's good for the Post Service. I think it's good for the people. It's good for democracy. But when folks come up with BS like Senator Lee did, we are going to fiercely push back on that type of just ridiculous accusations about our members.
Yeah. And our listeners and viewers, will get that joke about, us having time to go through every piece of mail.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So Congress is back in session after their summer break. Can you talk about what we had to fend off so far in this Congress and what you see coming up by the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, so far, there's been one major battle, and it's not just the case with us. It's basically the only significant thing that they've done, and that was, I'm sure people will have some level of familiarity with the one big beautiful bill, a budget bill that was passed through a process called budget reconciliation, and just takes a majority in both the House and the Senate. Um, it frankly was just a day-to-day battle for us to keep provisions out of that bill that would have cut our retirement benefits, made us pay more for our retirement benefits. And I think it's important to mention this because this illustrates what we're up against. This is in a Congress where we have very good relationships with the leadership of both parties in both houses of Congress. It's a Congress where we have really good relationships with important people in both the Senate and the House on the committees that have jurisdiction over us. But when it comes to stuff like budget, look, the reason they did this bill is to extend tax cuts, to do further tax cuts, and to find ways to pay for it. And one of the ways to pay for it that comes up and will come up again is by making federal employees, including us, pay more for our retirement benefits. It's ridiculous because the Postal Service is not taxpayer funded. And that ultimately is a very strong defense. So, I've been here at NALC headquarters for 15 years. We've been through a lot of battles on the Hill. We can go back to 5-day delivery, and then there was a time where they all wanted to go to centralized delivery. We, of course, have fought off all sorts of stupid, even some things that some would consider little things are not little things to us, such as adding language to tell arbitrators they have to consider finances, things that would tip the scale towards management like that. But none of the battles we've had were like this one. It was just relentless, and it was day after day after day after day. But we won, and we were successful. We were successful because of the strong bipartisan relationships we have, the influence we have here in DC, and of course, the influence that our members have, by whenever we did calls to action, our members jumped to action. This is going to happen again. They are going to do another budget reconciliation bill. And it is absolutely inevitable that someone somewhere in the crafting of that bill is going to propose to do the same kinds of things that we saw proposed in this bill. Make us pay more for retirement, cut our retirement benefits, probably things to harm the Postal Service. So those are the biggest battles that we have in front of us. I should mention that, while this Congress is not going to do much legislatively, probably outside of these budget bills, we do have legislation that's very important to us. Two that are out there right now. One, the Federal Retirement Fairness Act, which would let our former non-career employees buy back their non-career time and have it credited for retirement, is a top priority of ours. And then the Protect Our Letter Carriers Act, which is a really big deal. It's a huge piece of what we need to do to continue to see improvement in safety, and specifically from the crime that we've had to deal with the last few years. And we are working on another piece of legislation to do with the Postal Service's finances, that would just, it's kind of the last piece of the major policy change, following up on the Postal Reform Act that passed a few years ago, that'll be introduced. We're trying to get it done here in the next few weeks. That might be a little tough with the fight over the budget happening in the next few weeks, but in this Congress, we'll get this introduced. And those are three priorities of ours. And even we've learned in past Congresses, even if we don't have an opportunity to pass that bill, evident or obvious in front of us, the support that we build, like we are currently doing for the Federal Retirement Fairness Act and for the Protect Our Letter Carriers Act, which are two bills that, basically came from us, the NALC. When those opportunities do come, whether it's in this Congress or a future Congress, the work that we do to build support for them puts us in a position where we can get them across the finish line. So playing defense against those that try to cut mainly our retirement stuff, and then advancing our priorities is what we'll be doing the rest of this Congress.
Okay. So what can our listeners and members do right now to help deal with the White House and the Congress and these attacks?
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, contact your member of Congress, tell them to co-sponsor the Federal Retirement Fairness Act, tell them to co-sponsor the Protect Our Letter Carriers Act. If they already are a co-sponsor of it, thank them for being a co-sponsor, and just develop relationships with them. They letter carriers, one of our main strengths in the work that we have to do on the Hill is the fact that all around the country, we have members, number one, but in every single congressional district, our members basically reflect the rest of the population in that congressional district. And that allows us to build relationships with our members of Congress through our members. So I encourage you to communicate with them, communicate with the staff that works in their local office, get to know them. And then just stay tuned. There's a balance sometimes between, with the type things that this administration does and sort of the way they operate, that, we get an idea that they may be close to taking some sort of action or looking to take, exploring some sort of action. There's a lot of things that we could do to ask our members to help out with. So just, when we put out a call to action to make a phone call or send a letter, just jump all over that. And our members do. But we have kind of developed this sort of reputation. I'll give you an example of back in February when the White House was considering this stuff. On a Friday, we put out a call for our members to call the Speaker of the House, to call his office in the Capitol and tell them to tell the White House, no, don't do this. And so many of our members did is shut their phone lines down. So that's the kind of thing we want to do when we get to the point of needing to address an issue. So, just pay attention, social media, magazine, website, there's a lot of ways of communication out there now.
Right. And I just want to add, some of our newer members, they might not have ever had a federal job like this, and they might not know who the representative is. There's nothing to be ashamed of. You can go to the website. We'll help you find that information. You can Google who's my representative, answer a couple questions. It's now more easier than ever to find out who your representative is and how to get in contact with them. Don't be ashamed because you don't know something. Just get yourself informed, be an educated member, and that's our best union member.
Absolutely. That was very well said.
Every once in a while, I'll get it right. All right, now let's get into the dispute resolution process. A majority of our carriers might go through their whole career, or whatever, having to file a grievance or having a punishment put upon them. But if you do have that problem and you want the system to work, and you might hear it called the DRT team or DRP or Step B, you might hear those names and you might not know exactly what they are. So could you briefly explain about the grievance process between the Postal Service and the NALC? And just, if you want a more in-depth discussion about it, you can check out our podcast from September 25th of 2023, titled The Grievance Procedure. So if you want to do a little homework, listeners, viewers, you can check out that podcast.
Yeah, so our process is called the dispute resolution process. In its current form, it's been in place for about 25 years now. It just has a series of steps and it starts locally. So when something happens that violates our collective bargaining agreement, on the job there locally, let's just say management, just to give an example, someone that's not on the overtime desired list, they force them to work overtime when they had someone on the overtime desired list available, just as a simplistic example. The process goes through a series of steps, and it was originally designed to resolve grievances at the lowest possible step. So the first step is the steward, your shop steward, and the supervisor discuss it in a fairly informal process. It's actually called informal step A. If they are unable to resolve the grievance, then it goes up to the postmaster and the branch president or their designees at what we call formal step A, where it's a more formalized process of writing contentions and exchanging documents and things like that. If they're unable to resolve it, it goes to what we call step B, which is, or the dispute resolution teams. You may often hear the term DRT. That's what that means. At step B, there is one management and one union representative, and their full-time job is to receive those case files, documents. It'll have written facts and contentions, argument by both, supposed to have that for both sides, both the management and the union representatives from formal step A, and they issue a written decision. And they can issue several different types of decisions, and the process is designed that the vast majority of their decisions would be to resolve the grievance. And they write a written decision, send that decision back to the local parties. And the idea is that whatever their decision is, of course, it addresses that particular violation that happened that triggered the grievance, but also that it would be educational to prevent it from happening again. There are times when they may not agree at step B. And at step B, where they don't agree, then they would impasse that grievance. And what that means is we can't agree. Each side's going to write their contentions, and then it is sent to our NALC National Business Agents Office, who may appeal it to arbitration. And once that grievance is appealed to arbitration, often they are resolved in what we call pre-arbitration discussions, but sometimes they proceed to arbitration. Arbitration is a process where the union has a representative we call an advocate. The management has a representative that we call an advocate. We have an arbitrator that we have jointly selected with the Postal Service, and we sit down and basically in a little bit of like an informal court type proceeding in front of the arbitrator. Each side puts on their case, including witnesses and documents, and then ultimately the arbitrator decides, and that's the end of the process.
So there seems to be some kind of like backlog or some issues with that process, being timely. And Elise Foster, the branch president from Branch 11 in Chicago, Illinois, had a question. She wants to know if you can explain the issues concerning the backlog at the DRT Step B level of the process that we're facing.
Yeah, it's driven by two primary issues. Issue number one is just the sheer number of violations that happen locally, which generates a grievance. So you've got just the volume of grievances that we have. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the Postal Service flat out is not doing what they are supposed to do in the process. So in our national agreement, any of you that want to jump in there and read, you'll see memos on the dispute resolution process, Article 15 of our agreement's all about this grievance process. And both the union and management have certain responsibilities. The DRT, the step B level of the process, there's an entire MOU that's long actually that explains a lot of the responsibilities. A lot of those are at the headquarters level, a lot of those are at our national business agents offices level. Primarily, the problem, the volume, and then specifically what the Postal Service has not done is the Postal Service around the country has simply taken the approach that that is completely contrary to the intention of the process of resolving agreements at the lower level, is that they are just not going to resolve certain issues. So you have this combination of their unwillingness to resolve issues. So the grievances move up to the next level, which is what creates what we call a backlog. And you still have grievances coming in because of their continued ridiculous, repetitive violations at the local level. So there's a couple of different things that we are working on doing to address this. Number one is just the normal communication avenues that exist in our collective bargaining agreement. We continue to just push them every single day. Number two, though, is we are working on and likely are going to initiate a national level grievance on their failure to comply with the process that's resulted in the second piece. In the piece of them not doing their part, as I explained, specifically as it relates to step B. I've asked the national business agents last week at our executive council meeting to get some information that we've not asked them to get before. Once that is all provided here, chances are we're going to wrap that up into a grievance that, of course, we'll have to deal with and potentially hear in national arbitration. The other side of this, or the other piece of this, is the compliance piece at the local level. And on just a fundamental level, the Postal Service has 100% control over whether there is a grievance or not. Because if they do not violate our collective bargaining agreement, there's no grievance. There are things that I'm not necessarily at liberty to discuss that other people, not the NALC, are doing as it relates to this grievance activity that'll be useful tools. Not other unions, more of a sort of a objective point of view of their non-compliance. And then we are in a place where we're going to engage every avenue we have to, because the idea that we negotiate and through our bargaining process in good faith, we get an agreement, and then the Postal Service just day after day after day after day refuses to comply with it. At some point, they've got to be held accountable for that beyond just what we have through our grievance arbitration procedure. So there's a lot of activity around this. I mean, we are, of course, we want to do everything we can do to get grievances moving, to get decisions so that member can get justice and the branches can get their decisions back. What we will not do, though, is compromise what should be the appropriate remedy in those grievances. So we have to be sure that what we do in terms of fixing what's happening with the process is met with the same amount of effort and the same amount of intensity of stopping the violations. Because if the contract violations stopped, or significantly, they never will probably completely stop, but if they significantly slow down tomorrow, we could catch up in the grievance process. It's just the fact that there are so many that continue to flood in. So Those are the things that we're working on here. Let me say this to the branches, and I think this will answer one of the questions, Eddie, if I remember right, that we had. I'm often asked by branches, like, what can we do at the branch level where we have just non-compliance over and over and over and over? Um, and the answer is stay diligent, continue to do the work, continue to file those grievances, and request an appropriate remedy. Of course, that's a make whole remedy, but, at some point, a grievance is not just supposed to make people whole. Our whole process, as I mentioned, Eddie, when you asked me the question about, um, explaining the process, is designed to resolve it at the lowest level. It's designed to stop these things from happening again. And our remedy request, should certainly reflect that.
Okay. Yeah, you answered my next two questions there in your answer. Just want to give them a little credit. You got Joe DiStefano from branch 137 in, well, Windsor, New York, New Windsor, New York, excuse me, and Carl Catalano from branch 348 in Eureka, California. Just to go back, just in case we have some new members out there that might not understand compliance. So can you just break that down in like a simpler form so our stewards know that, our branch presidents know that, our branches understand that, but just uh, slow
Yeah.
it down a little bit for them.
So when we talk about compliance, and actually or non-compliance
Sure.
is probably the better term, it kind of incorporates several different things potentially. One is simple compliance with our collective bargaining agreement. So, you don't administer overtime, for example, like you should, or they screw up the way they approve leave, that kind of thing. I think when we talk about these like repetitive violations, we're talking about where, the post service is, let's say it's Article 8, that's overtime. They violated Article 8. We've gotten a grievance decision that says you violated it, stop violating it. They do it again the next day. We get more grievance decisions. They continue to do it. So you're doing two things then, the Postal Service is. They are violating Article 8 because they're not following what the contract says. But then the way our process is designed, they're also not complying with that grievance settlement that told them not to violate it anymore. So it becomes, which Article 15 of our national agreement covers this grievance arbitration process. So it becomes a violation of Article 15 too. Then we have more simple than that, non-compliance, where sometimes, a grievance decision will say to pay someone X amount of dollars, and we get that decision back and they just simply don't pay it, or they take forever and ever and ever. And we end up having to, file another grievance saying, that you violated Article 15 of our national agreement because you did not comply with this grievance decision. So it kind of breaks down into compliance with our agreement, doing what the contract says you're supposed to do. But then you also have to comply with grievance decisions that are out there.
So that's like the number one job of our union, to
Yep.
make sure that the postal service is complying to our collective bargaining agreement, our
Yeah,
contract.
it is. It is. It is. And Eddie, I think I've got one kind of big picture point to make, but I think you have one more, maybe more specific question.
Sure. So this is from Don Martinez, branch 201 in Derby, Kansas. He said, can you explain the cease and desist language and that being a sticking point in the grievance resolution at all levels of the process?
Yeah, there's been messaging from the Postal Service at headquarters that has basically told Step B management team members not to put cease and desist in decisions, which is asinine, and I believe is a violation of the DRT memo. I mean, our JCAM in multiple places, the parties have agreed explicitly in our joint contract administration manual that a cease and desist is an appropriate remedy. And then to issue an instruction that is contradictory to that is part of what we are putting together, and what ultimately, as I said, is likely going to turn into a national level grievance. And Don, I think your question is true. It is a sticking point, and there are a lot of grievances out there that is the issue, their unwillingness to put um, language saying that management will cease and desist the violations.
And just make a point, if you're a new member and you're not a steward, but you want to get educated and informed, our contract, the collective bargaining agreement, the JCAM, they're all on the website. You can look them over, get yourself educated. Our best members and informed members, we always talk about. Now, that also being said, if you don't understand anything or something about the contract, talk to your steward, talk to your branch president. Don't go in there thinking like everything, like you're Conor McGregor and you're going to walk in and bully anybody. But be informed, be educated, and make sure you got the right information in front of you.
Yeah, I think back to, when I first started, and I think the best process is definitely reach out there on your, go out on your own, read everything you can read, but then ask questions of your steward or your branch officers of the things that you read. And sometimes, it might be to, don't read it with the idea of looking for what you want it to be.
Right.
Read it with the idea of learning what it is and then, using them to help confirm or clear up things. I really believe that's the best way to learn.
All right, let's get into collective bargaining next. Our national agreement expires on May 22nd,
Yep.
2026, so a little under a year now. We hear that collective bargaining is an ever-going process of preparation. Can you talk about the NALC's plans of preparation for this next round of collective bargaining?
Sure. We're really excited about the work that's actually ongoing now. As you said, there's parts of it that never really stop. As far as all the things that we evaluate that impact our bargaining. We've talked many times in years past. We don't bargain in a bubble. The things that happen around us are have different varying levels of influence, but they all have an influence. So we kind of continue doing that. But then, a few months before we begin bargaining, we do start a lot of parts of the preparation in earnest, I would say, as far as, starting to processes that result in, actual documents and proposals and things that we, pass across the table, so to speak, in the collective bargaining process. Um, the executive council was here last week, and we had a good couple of days of getting deep into this, and we've got some other plans going forward. But it's I think we're in a good spot. We got plenty of time. We are going to create more opportunities than we've ever had before for our members to be involved and give their input on certain topics and then sort of put all of that together as we lead up to February of next year.
Can you talk about subcommittees and actually what they do in the process?
Yeah, so for a long time, we have used subcommittees in some form. And back when I first started, it was um, subcommittees were executive council members um, only, and we all basically would come together and kind of sit in one big room, and the little groups would talk about different topics, and kind of happened pretty quickly, to be honest. And then it evolved over the years. I mean, this will be the fifth time I've been here at headquarters, and deeply involved, of course, in collective bargaining, and it's evolved over time. And I think where we are now, it's just an expansion of what we've done the last three times. But today, the way we use subcommittees is each executive council member, we divide up by topic subcommittees. Certain articles fit into certain subcommittees, and you can go to our website and see which council members are on each subcommittee. But the council members choose which topic they want to work on. We then have letter care staff from here at headquarters work with them and put them together on that topic on whatever the articles, the topic that they are assigned, and we have them go through a frankly pretty in-depth, lengthy process of reviewing a lot of different stuff, and then ultimately they're tasked with the drafting of proposals for collective bargaining within, for the articles and the topics that they are assigned.
Yeah. So, reading the postal record, we have a new thing called rank and file committees. Can you get into what they are and what they're going to do? And like, is it going to be like a 1 week process? Is it an ongoing process? Like, what's the goal between the rank and file committee?
Yeah, this is a new thing. Eddie, I think before I get into the rank and file, in order to
Sure.
understand what the rank and file does, I should talk a little bit more in detail about the process for the subcommittees.
Sure.
So the subcommittees, um, the council members, the staff, we have them review a lot of stuff. They're, of course, our official bargaining positions that come from NALC conventions where branches and state associations have submitted resolutions. Conventions have considered, debated them, and ultimately passed them. They review other unions' collective bargaining agreements. They review things that we've submitted in years past that have not been achieved. And then ultimately they discuss and of course bring their own experiences, the council members from their own areas of responsibility, the staff, of course, from the things that they deal with, and all of them interact with a lot of members all the time. Kind of combine all that together and get to the point of um, creating, drafting actual proposals. The rank and file is a new idea for us, and it is designed to provide a what I think is going to be a very useful piece of information from these members to give to those subcommittees as part of their work. So we in the first round, let's call it here, next week here in the DC area, we've got 30 rank and file members. And by rank and file, I mean not executive council members. We're going to divide them into three separate groups. One of those groups is 10 branch leaders. One of the groups is 10 uh, people that are typically contract enforcers, but very experienced with dealing with the collective bargaining agreement out in the field. And then the third group is newer members, those that maybe haven't been around, that long because that provides a fresh perspective. And basically, what we're going to do over the course of a week is have them on this very same topics that the subcommittees are working on, replicate the exercise that the subcommittees are doing to provide their input from each of those three groups on that topic and package it in a way that we can give it to that subcommittee as another piece of information. Um, we're really excited about this because I think it's even among the 30, those three groups will all bring different perspectives. And I think putting them through as far as reviewing um, resolutions and there's things we'll do to, we're not going to have them sit there and make them read all the other unions' contracts. Um, but to give them the relevant information and have them spend a few hours over the course of a week on each of the topics, having discussion, amongst themselves and providing that input will be very, very, very important. We also are going to have them provide input on the stuff that we would consider the economic type pieces of the agreement. Of course, Article 9 and wages, but also includes, things like the structure of the workforce. It includes Article 6. It includes Article 32, subcontracting, which we don't have a subcommittee for. We discuss those type things as an entire executive council. But we thought it was also important to get the perspective of the rank and file members there. We are doing this with this first group of 30. We are probably going to do it again, likely in kind of early January with a new group, a different group of 30 people. So just two different points in time in the committee's process, two different groups of people, a little bit of time in between. And just as another point of of information. Also, one more thing I'll add is, in addition to these rank and file groups, we are through surveys and polling and things like that over the course of the next several months. There are going to be opportunities for every single member to provide their input, to provide their opinions and priorities and things like that. So we'll have a little bit more on that in the next several weeks, but you can look for that over the course of the rest of this year.
Okay. Now, leading up to May, can you give us like a little peek behind the curtain, like in your strategic plan, on what the council will be doing, what headquarters will be doing, like for those preparations for a collective bargaining?
Yeah, a lot of what I just said, the
Sure.
council is going to meet regularly for the next few months. I mean, probably, multiple times in October, a couple times in November. Um, the in between those council meetings, our committees are working. We've got these two separate rank and file pieces. We have a national rap session the weekend before Thanksgiving in Cleveland in November. This, hopefully will be the primary topic there. So we'll spend the next several months basically preparing and being in a place where when we get to where we officially open bargaining in February, we've got proposals that we're going to submit. We've got a really good idea based on the input of the committees and, obviously the council on, kind of what those priorities will look like. There is one unknown piece though, and that is what it's going to look like on the other side of the table with the Postal Service. So, which is a piece of it too. I mean, who you're bargaining with, to some degree, it's got to be a piece of the consideration when you decide strategy. Like you can't, you don't ignore that. And then, in this volatile world we live in, there's a lot that can change. But um, so our preparation is, preparing for if we were to open tomorrow with what we have now, because those are the only things that we know as certainties right now, but also making some preparations for other possibilities, depending on what happens.
So do you foresee, like, taking those variables out, a difference in the bargaining process after that ceremonial handshake?
Yeah, every round is different. Um, I do think that this year, um, after we begin, I think we will be in just because we started earlier and than we ever have, not just earlier than last time than we did in 2019, 16, or 2011. Um, and we've incorporated, I think, more information from more people and more feedback. I think we'll be in a place where we are ready to pass all our proposals and just earlier than we ever have before, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know, that doesn't necessarily lead to a change in what's going to happen in the third week in May, when we reach the expiration of the current agreement. But I do think there will be, at least on our side, the preparation will be better. The Postal Service, I don't, they're different every time because the players change. Their main negotiator has not changed in all the time I've been here, but the people that do a lot of the work on a lot of the different topics will be different. And, you kind of have an idea what that'll look like, but um, no different than almost everything else we deal with them, not even just at the national level, at the regional level, even at the local level. Um, every year we get through bargaining, we go through bargaining, or every time we go through, it can become more and more difficult to get people in the room that have the ability to make a decision, and say, yeah, we can do this, or no, we can't do that. So that'll likely continue and be a bigger challenge, but we'll deal with that. So I think we'll be better prepared or earlier prepared than we've ever been before. But process-wise, we'll see how that plays out. Our intention is to push the process as quickly as we can, because I think that benefits us to get to the point of having an idea of whether or not we're going to have the opportunity to reach a tentative agreement that meets our goals or not. The quicker we can get there, the better in today's environment, which is very different, frankly, in a lot of ways than it's been in years past.
Okay. So before we get into the Ask the Mailbag segment, just want to say if you have any thoughts or questions or clarifications on the topics we just discussed, make sure you reach out to us through our email, social@nalc.org, social@nalc.org. Ask your questions or comments, clarifications. Let's get into the mailbag. Ben Lembeck, excuse, that's easy to say. Brother Ben Lembeck from branch 1308 in Madison, South Dakota. He wants you to explain the process of cashing out of 40 annuals of annual leave that is new from the latest contract. Specifically, can we do this year, and how are we going to do it without losing extra AL at the end of the year?
Yeah, well, good question, because that's a new thing. So first thing I would say is we just last Friday signed two MOUs, one that increased the carryover as we have for several years from 440 to 520. But it also increased the amount of leave that can be sold back or cashed out from 40 hours to 80 hours. So the way this works is you have to have the maximum carryover amount, which is 520 hours going into 2026. And then when you go into 2026, you're not actually selling part of that 520. You're carrying that over. You're selling your leave for the following year, which can be kind of confusing. We actually spent a lot of time talking about this in executive council. So, what we are actually selling is leave from the year in the future, not leave that we've already carried over. Now, effectively, once your leave is credited, in addition to what you carried over, what you've sold back, the deduction of that many hours from your balance, it doesn't matter. It's going to come off that total balance, whether it came off what you carried over or what you're actually selling back. So, as we get closer to the end of the leave year, I mean, we're in mid-September now. Leave year ends around the first of the end of the year, calendar year. We're going to put out some very detailed information about that because it'll be the first time doing it. So people, have a real clear understanding. But as far as what you need to know for sure right now is you got to carry over the max, which is 520, and then you got to use 75 hours or less sick leave the year before.
Okay. Next question's from Everett Wiley, branch 404 in Waco, Texas. He's also the state president of Texas. Are we going to continue to receive NDGVs, the new next generation delivery vehicles? Some have came in, but all of a sudden they seem to have stopped out there. He's just wondering about that question.
Yeah, no, the production of them is continuing. The deployment is continuing. There has been nothing that has stopped that process. There have been attempts to stop that process, and I know Brother Wiley's aware of those on Capitol Hill, but no, they've. I don't know. I'm not aware if the Postal Service has significantly changed their deployment plans. But that's something they would probably tell us, and they haven't. But I can tell you for certain that the production and all that stuff is on track. It's not been slowed down at all.
Okay. Latanya Williams from Branch 530 in Birmingham, Alabama. She wants to know if you can give her any information on the route adjustment process or a joint route adjustment process.
Yeah, we've talked a good bit about a joint process with them, what it would look like. We currently have a joint process in place when S&DCs are established. that has served us really well. It is different than what we did in the last large scale joint process, and I think is a pretty good roadmap to what a joint process looks like. You know, the technology that we use, the GPS technology, um, to be very honest, it while it more information is good, I think one of the primary problems, other than just management not doing what they were supposed to do, which is no shock to anyone, is it might have even been a little too much information for evaluating routes in the previous process. So what we've kind of looked to do and communicated to them is that there's absolutely a place for us to use that information, but we need to use it in a way that makes the process more efficient. And the simple, no-brainer way to do that is use it to create 3999s that we use for adjustment purposes, which anybody that's ever participated in these joint processes knows that's usually the thing that holds them up more than anything, is getting 3999s done. So there's been a good bit of talk about it. I'll be honest, we've got a few issues with the Postal Service with the current joint process and S&DCs that we're trying to work through. Hopefully, once we get work through those, there will be an opportunity potentially to have a joint process that does just what we've always done in every joint process. We try to, incorporate new things and make it better, but certainly keep the things that have worked well for us for some length of time.
All right, Branch President Tom Dogolinski from Branch 134 in Syracuse, New York. He wants you to explain the MISC adjustment, MISC, that most carriers had in their back pay check. The adjustment, he said, is around 30 to 40% of deductions for both active and retirees. Can you get in that a little bit?
Yeah. So simply put, the adjustment that you see there, or deduction, is the cumulative number from all of the adjustments that you see both on the earnings statement and the ones that it doesn't go back far enough to show you. So if you log in on Light Blue, it only goes back so many pay periods. And they're all lumped into a single entry, as opposed to listing them individually. So the gross adjustments are all listed individually, and then the miscellaneous adjustment that's there is like the cumulative total from all of those gross adjustments. We've had a lot of questions about that, and at this point have checked. I wouldn't venture to guess how many we've actually checked with the Postal Service, but aside from the couple hundred that we had errors with, we've communicated to, we've not found any thankfully, knock on wood, we've not found any significant issues. So, but that's what it represents.
Okay. Randall Wirtz from Branch 791, Marysville, Washington. He wants to know, is there any estimate on when we can get a new JCAN?
Yeah, it's not going to be long. The vast majority of the work is done. I am going to start reviewing it here in the very near future. We have cover colors and art done, so I think it is absolutely probable even that you're going to see a new JCAM in the mail, available online this fall, for sure.
So again, for our newer members, because I know we talk to our leaders and our activists a lot, but if someone's their first podcast they're listening to, what is the JCAM?
Yeah, so JCAM stands for Joint Contract Administration Manual. And it's this big document that's several hundred pages that takes every piece of our contract, our national agreement, and has the language from our national agreement, but then it incorporates the parties, us and the Postal Service, our agreed upon understanding of what that language means. It also incorporates issues where we've had national arbitration in years past about application of the agreement. It incorporates sorts of national grievance settlements that we've had. But it basically is a big book that explains section by section by section what our entire contract means. And it's a really, really useful tool. So, just for example, anyone we train at any level to handle grievances for the NALC, when they get a grievance or they start looking, even investigating a grievance, and they want to look at the application of what happened here, what does the contract say about it? The JCAM is the first place they go 100% of the time. It's always the first place, and the vast, vast, vast majority of questions can be answered in the JCAM. So for like Randall, I know is a very active in representation at a lot of different levels. The JCAM, for those of us that, contract administration and grievances and things like that have, been our lives for so long, the JCAM is like the holy grail. It's like, the new JCAM comes out, it's the most exciting day of our lives. And there's a lot of you listen to this that know exactly what I'm talking about. And thankfully, it's going really well, honestly. I say that I haven't okayed every single word of it yet, but because of a lot of the work we did during the bargaining process, it's gone pretty smooth so far.
Okay. Next question, Anthony Kennedy from Branch 630, Greensboro, North Carolina. He wants to know if we can get the audio version of the postal record back. He really enjoyed listening to it.
Yes, that is coming back. We are going to modify it a little bit, but not modify it in terms of the way you get it. Hopefully, it's just better and smoother when you get it. But mostly, it's about like the process we have of recording it. But yes, that absolutely the audio version will be back and available. And I don't know if we'll have it out for the September one, but I feel certain we will for the October version.
Okay. If I could, that were the questions that we had, but I just want to remind everyone this is a Suicide Prevention Month, and earlier this week was National Suicide Prevention Day. And I work on the emergency response team, one of the many staff here that work with it. And we're going to talk about that in a later episode, what the emergency response team is. But we send letter carriers out to talk to the members of the workroom floor when they lose a member. Of that workroom floor, and whether it's through an accident or suicide or whatever happens, illness. Just want to let you know, if you're dealing with any kind of suicidal thoughts, like, you're important. We need you here. Your family and your friends need you here. People care about you. You have resources there. You have EAP, you have your health insurance, your city, your town, your county has resources to help you. There's groups that can help you, with a quick Google search. You can dial 988 and be connected to the Suicide Awareness and Prevention Hotline. And you can talk to someone right there. They can help you to get to the next moment in your life. I know, when you're in those thoughts, times you feel bad. Just, fight through, talk to someone on the workroom floor if you have to, talk to somebody, because we want you here and we need you here.
Yeah, thank you, Eddie. And that's part of the reason we established the emergency response team. We actually did a full week of training for them on suicide awareness and prevention. And like Eddie said, there are resources out there. They are out there. There are people, despite what you may be feeling or thinking in a difficult moment, a difficult time in your life, reach out. And it can be as simple as dialing that number. But talk to someone. That's the most important thing. And I know when we think about, probably everyone listening to this we've all dealt with something, over the course of our lives, most of us, multiple things and difficulties. And um, one thing I think is true, it almost always makes you feel better to talk to someone. And there's always someone there to talk to. But you're all important. Somebody needs all of us. And, it's really important to remember that.
Not to talk to another sad subject, but the NFL season started. We won't talk about the Saints this episode. We'll wait a little bit, or at least to the 2027 draft, when Arch Manning or the brother from Louisiana, LSU, or Penn State's your new quarterback.
I don't know. I don't know. Arch is not doing himself a lot of favors right now either. So, um, no, I don't know. I guess I was spoiled in the
Yeah,
quarterback area for a big part of my life. So, not complaining.
great. So that's all I had. Do you have anything else before we sign off?
No, this is fun. Always glad to have the opportunity to talk and talk to our members and communicate some things. We got some exciting plans coming up for the podcast in terms of topics and information and things like that. So, Eddie, I appreciate you. You do a great job with it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. You too. All right. Well, thank you for listening to the Fight Like Hell podcast. Please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And please share this podcast with your NALC brothers and sisters. You can follow the NALC on social media on Facebook, X, and Instagram. You can also find links to our accounts in the episode description. May your steward be by your side, and may your union have your back. Thanks for listening. See you later.